Some betrayals don't just shatter your heart, they bury your soul. He spent 22 years locked away for a crime he swore he didn't commit, accused of murdering the woman he loved. They told him she was gone for good. No body, just blood, enough to put him behind bars for life. But fate has a cruel way of circling back. One day, far from home and decades removed from everything he'd known, he saw something that froze him in place. A laugh he hadn't heard since his youth. A face he thought would only haunt his nightmares. In that instant, everything he'd tried to bury came clawing back to the surface. He followed from a distance, silent, observant, listening. She looked vibrant, carefree, untouched by the years that had withered him behind cold steel bars. He was supposed to move forward, rebuild, and be grateful for his second chance. But some wounds never close. Some ghosts refuse to stay dead. And some love stories aren't love stories at all. What began as a reunion was destined to end very differently. This wasn't just another crime. This was something darker, something that settles deep in your chest and refuses to let go. When the truth surfaced, it wasn't just shocking. It was almost impossible to believe. Stay with us. You're watching Ruthless Realities. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for weekly stories that will leave you stunned and questioning everything. Darius Holloway was the kind of man most women claimed they wanted, but rarely chose. 26, tall, soft-spoken, with hands rough from years of honest work. A skilled auto mechanic, raised by his grandmother in rural Georgia after losing his mother young. Darius valued loyalty, hard work, and most of all, love. Then came Selena Brooks. She was his opposite in every way, wild, magnetic, unpredictable. Selena didn't just enter a room. She stormed into it. 24, sharp-tongued and dangerously beautiful. Folks in town knew her name since high school, and not for good reasons. She dropped out at 16, dated older men, and soon was running drugs on the street for a local Atlanta crew. But when Darius met her, all he saw was possibility. He didn't recognize the trap. They met on a rainy Wednesday night at a gas station. He was filling up his truck. She was inside arguing with a cashier over a declined card. He stepped in, paid for her snacks, and walked to her car. She gave him a smile he couldn't shake from his mind. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Selena told him she'd left the streetlight behind, said she wanted something real, and Darius believed her. She moved in with him and his grandmother, talked about getting a job at the beauty salon nearby. By then, Darius was working 2 jobs, days at the shop, nights at a warehouse, just to make ends meet. He didn't mind. He believed in building from the ground up. Then Selena told him she was pregnant. Darius cried tears of joy. He painted the spare room, bought baby books, and started saving. But 3 weeks later, she claimed she'd miscarried. What she didn't tell him was that she'd ended the pregnancy by choice. She never wanted a baby. Not really. Still, Darius loved her deeply, saw her as the mother of his future children. When she broke down one night, professing her love, he proposed. She said yes. The wedding was small, just close friends and family. His grandmother blessed the union, though she never trusted Selena. Something about that girl don't sit right with me, she'd once whispered. But Darius didn't listen. Love made him blind. He didn't see the late-night calls, the unexplained weekend trips, the new jewelry she never accounted for, or the steady cash flow despite her unemployment. The truth? Selena had never left the game. She was still running drugs, and her clean image made her even more valuable to her crew. Sometimes she borrowed Darius's truck under the guise of errands, but instead, she was transporting packages across county lines. When Darius woke for his warehouse shift at 3 a.m., he'd sometimes catch her whispering into her phone in the dark. She'd claim it was her cousin going through a breakup, and he'd believe her again. Neighbors began to talk. They saw her with unfamiliar men in expensive cars. His grandmother warned him to pay attention, but love can make the sharpest man foolish. Selena knew exactly how to keep him wrapped around her finger. A clean record, steady work, the perfect cover. And whenever she felt him pulling away, she'd reel him back in with soft words and stage tears. Darius wanted to believe her. He needed to. But love doesn't blind you. It just convinces you not to look until it's too late. Selena had always danced on the edge, but this time she was running, not from a bad breakup or an unfinished fight, but for her life. It started with a deal gone wrong. She'd been skimming off the top from a mid-level distributor for months. Nothing big at first, but greed makes people sloppy. One day, she took too much. $2 million worth of product and cash vanished. Street word was that she'd walked away from a drop and never returned. The crew started asking questions. Then they stopped asking and started hunting. Selena knew the rules. Cross a crew like that, and you don't get do-overs. You disappear or you die. So she made a reckless choice. She faked her death. While Darius worked a double shift, Selena staged a crime scene in their apartment. She slashed the couch, smeared pig's blood on the walls and floor, ripped out her own hair, smashed her wedding ring, and left it bloodied by the sink. She soaked one of Darius's shirts in blood and shoved it under the bathroom cabinet. She cracked her phone screen, left it behind, packed a small bag, grabbed a burner, and slipped out the back door. By the time Darius came home the next morning, police were already there. A neighbor had reported hearing screams and banging during the night. The officers forced entry and found the bloody scene. There was no body, just blood, hair, a broken ring, and her phone on the counter. Darius was stunned. He kept repeating her name, asking, "Where's Selena? Is she okay?" But the detectives weren't looking for her. They were looking at him. They found the blood-soaked shirt in minutes. His size. His initials on the tag. The amount of blood suggested she was dead. Darius was detained immediately, and within 24 hours, charged with second-degree murder. In interrogation, he swore he didn't know what happened. Maybe she'd been taken. Maybe it was a robbery. But nothing was stolen. The timeline worked against him. Surveillance showed him leaving work early that night, and no one could vouch for him between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. The DA painted the perfect tragedy for the jury. A hard-working man, pushed to the edge by a volatile marriage, finally snapped, or so the prosecutors claimed. They painted a picture of constant conflict. The secret miscarriage, the whispered arguments, the money troubles, and incriminating evidence found in the apartment. Then came the river discovery. A week after his arrest, a local fisherman spotted a small plastic tote floating downstream. Inside were several Selena's personal items, a broken necklace, her wallet stripped of cash and ID, and a pair of shoes she was rarely seen without. Police took it as proof that he had disposed of her remains, or at least staged it to look that way. But what no one suspected was that Selena was alive, very much alive. That same night, she paid an old acquaintance from her early hustling days to drive her out of state. With a wig, oversized sunglasses, and fake identification, she crossed into Texas by sunrise. 2 days later, she was in Mexico, settling in a small coastal town notorious for its loose extradition policies and cash-only economy. Meanwhile, Darius's trial began. Friends and family testified. His grandmother wept as she told the court she'd raise him better. Former co-workers described his loyalty and calm nature, but character witnesses weren't enough. The prosecution replayed every argument the couple had, paraded neighbors who claimed to have overheard shouting, and even played an old 911 call Selena had made months earlier reporting a domestic dispute, one she later withdrew. When Darius took the stand, his voice shook as he swore he had nothing to do with Selena's disappearance. But the jury didn't see a grieving husband. They saw headlines, blood-stained photographs, and an empty seat where Selena should have been. He was convicted and sentenced to 22 years in prison. And Selena? She vanished into her new life. New name, new papers, eventually even a new husband. But the truth has a way of resurfacing, and fate has a habit of balancing the scales, no matter how long it takes. Stay with us. You're watching True Crime Files 247. Darius Holloway had never imagined he'd see the inside of a prison cell, let alone for the murder of the woman he loved. But after the verdict, when those steel doors clanged shut behind him, the weight of reality pressed him like the cold concrete beneath his feet. 22 years. That was his sentence for a crime he hadn't committed. At first, Darius clung to hope. Hope that the truth would eventually surface, that someone would realize a mistake. He filed appeal after appeal, sent letters to Innocence Project's journalists and pastors. But the world moved on. Inside, he changed. He grew quiet, withdrawn. The other inmates called him Old Soul, not just for his demeanor, but for the way grief seemed stitched into his very posture. He avoided fights, kept to himself, and read everything he could get his hands on, law books, novels, old newspapers. He learned the language of the courts, how to write motions, how appeals worked, how convictions were overturned. None of it mattered. Every motion was denied. Every plea returned with a polite rejection. He found purpose mentoring younger inmates through the prison's guidance program. He taught them to write clearly, to manage their tempers, to keep dignity in a place built to strip it away. But even in moments of purpose, Selena haunted him. Her laughter, the scent of her perfume, the way she hummed while cleaning. In dreams, she came smiling or screaming. His grandmother, Miss Janice, was his anchor. Every month she rode the bus to see him, bringing homemade cookies wrapped in foil, worn paperbacks from the church library, and her unwavering faith. "The Lord sees, baby, even when man don't," she'd say. But with each passing year, her visits slowed. One winter, she caught the flu. It turned into pneumonia. She was gone before spring. Darius wasn't allowed to attend her funeral. He sat on his bunk clutching her last letter. "Son, if I'm not here when you come home, know that I never stopped believing you. The truth always rises." That night, he cried until his sobs echoed down the tear. After her death, he stopped hoping. He wrote only for his own sanity, unsent letters to Selena, to God, to the man he once was. He ignored calls from old friends. Holidays passed without acknowledgement. His cell stayed neat, but lifeless. Time moved without mercy. He measured the years not by birthdays, but by which guard were still there and how many fresh faces filled the block. Then came Dre, a young inmate, sharp-witted, prideful, and too much like Darius had been at that age. Dre found one of Darius's unsent letters and said, "Man, maybe you just need someone to actually look at this." Together, they began drafting a petition. Dre typed in the law library, made copies, and sent it out, another long shot. For the first time in years, Darius felt the faint stirrings of belief. They worked late into the night, combing over trial records, Dre asking questions no one had before. But months passed with no word. Hope sank again. Even Dre moved on. Then one afternoon, a guard called out, "Holloway, roll up." Darius blinked. "What?" "Court order. You're going home." A recent Supreme Court ruling on mishandled evidence had cracked the door open for appeals. The blood analysis in his case, done by a now disgraced lab, was ruled inadmissible. His conviction was overturned. He walked out with a duffel bag, a pair of state boots, and 22 years of memories. No apology, no restitution, just freedom. At 48, his back a little bent, beard streaked with gray, eyes shadowed with 2 decades of loss, Darius returned to the world. The state handed him a bus ticket, donated clothes, and silence. He found a small studio on the outskirts of Augusta, crack paint, a flickering hallway light. But it was his. He worked 6 days a week in an auto body shop. No questions asked, none answered. Mornings were coffee from a tin, grease under his nails by 8. After years of being told when to eat, sleep, and breathe, the freedom of his own schedule was enough. But nights were different. Nights were quiet, too quiet. And in that stillness, the memories returned. Selena laughing on the porch. Selena in the white sundress with yellow flowers. Selena's voice calling his name just before he woke up in a cold sweat. He told himself she was gone forever, until one rainy Sunday. He came home from the shop, boots muddy, clothes damp. He made a sandwich, switched on the small TV, and scrolled through an old borrowed phone. He wasn't one for social media, but sometimes he browsed public pages, vacation shots, food photos, anything to keep his mind occupied. Then he froze. A picture of a beach in Mexico, blue skies, swaying palms. In the background, barely visible, a woman laughing, her hand clasped in a man's. A little boy in a red cap ran in front of them. Behind them, a stroller. Darius's thumb hovered over the phone screen. No, it couldn't be. He pinched the photo wider, slow and deliberate. Her hair was longer now, woven into a thick braid that spilled over her shoulder. Oversized sunglasses hid her eyes, but he didn't need to see them to recognize that crooked smile, the one she wore when she'd been caught pulling something slick. The slight twist in her upper lip. It was Selena, and on her right shoulder, barely peeking out from beneath her sundress strap, was a tattoo. A small rose vine. He remembered when she got it, back when they were 20. She'd said it was for new beginnings. The phone slipped from his hand, hitting the couch with a soft thud. His fingers shook. He picked it up again, staring at the screen as if the pixels might rearrange and make him wrong. But there was no mistake. Selena Brooks, the woman the world believed had died in their apartment, the woman who had framed him and vanished, was alive. And not just alive, thriving. 2 kids, a husband, a life. He stood abruptly, stumbling toward the window, his breath shortened, fists clenched, heat gathering behind his eyes. It wasn't sadness. Something deep inside him had snapped. The grief that had weighed him down for over 2 decades curdled into fury. He thought back to the trial, the prosecutors painting him as a jealous husband, the reporters calling him a monster, the jury avoiding his gaze, and all the while she had been out there laughing, drinking margaritas on some beach, while he ate off a dented metal tray in prison. He dropped back into the couch, eyes glued to the screen. He needed certainty. Hours slipped away as he dug through tagged tourist photos. Cancun, Playa del Carmen, Cabo. Then he saw her again. Different photo. Same smile, a bright sundress, a cocktail top with a pink umbrella. The caption, family vacation bliss. His stomach turned. He thought of Miss Janice, his grandmother, visiting month after month, growing frielier until she passed, still believing Selena had been murdered. He thought about the funeral he wasn't allowed to attend, the years of missed birthdays, the phone calls that never came. And then he thought about revenge. He didn't have a plan yet, just a need. Within days, he'd scraped together what little he had, wages from the auto shop, a small grant from a reentry program, enough to hire Lance Hightower, a grizzled ex-cop whose connections stretched across borders. Lance's fee was steep, but when he saw the photo and heard Darius' story, he gave him a discount. "I need to know everything," Darius told him. Her new name, where she lived, who she loved now. "Give me 10 days," Lance said. It took 5. "She goes by Mariah Lopez," Lance told him, handing over a thick manila envelope. "Fake ID, new life. Lives in Cancun, married to an American, Travis Richardson. Owns a beach bar. 2 kids. Drops them off at school every morning." Darius flipped through the photos. Selena, now Mariah, shopping, laughing, living. The boil in his chest deepened. "She set you up?" Lance said. The blood evidence, the missing body, that shirt, they planted it all. "No doubt." Darius didn't respond, just stared at the woman who had buried him alive. 2 days later, he was on a flight to Mexico, traveling under the name Eric Daniels, courtesy of one of Lance's contacts. Not illegal, just off the radar. He rented a modest apartment a mile from the beach, blending in with tourists in a baseball cap and sunglasses. Then he saw her, walking out of a grocery store with her son, smiling unbothered. He began to track her movements. School drop-off at 7:30, grocery runs on Thursdays, beach walks on Sundays. Her husband worked late at the bar. Every note went into a small black notebook. One evening, he watched from the dunes as she laughed with Travis on the beach, their children playing in the surf. His fist tightened. He thought of Miss Janice, the years lost, the sound of chains and metal doors closing behind him. She'd moved on, erased him. The days bled together, watching her at cafes, parks, boutiques. Every smile and laugh she shared with strangers burned like acid in his gut. "She teaches him how to live," he wrote one night. "She taught me how to die." On the 7th day, he followed her to the town square. She held her son's hand, bought churros, laughed with a street vendor. When Travis arrived, she kissed him before they drove off together. 9 days in Cancun had turned the quiet fire inside him into a roaring blaze. Then came Thursday. Selena sat alone at a beachside cafe called Cafe Del Mar. The sun filtered through a yellow umbrella above her table. She sipped something cold from a mason jar, utterly unaware of the shadow crossing the street toward her. Her eyes lifted, and the color drained from her face. "Darius," she breathed, barely above a whisper. He didn't blink. "You're supposed to be dead," she said. "So were you," he replied, voice low and sharp. She glanced around, hand twitching toward her purse. "Sit," he said. She did. "I didn't know you were out," she murmured. "You didn't think I ever would be." Her fingers trembled around the glass. "I had no choice," she began, struggling to steady her breath. "They were going to kill me. I had to run. So you framed me, faked your death, stole my life. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I thought maybe someone would figure it out, but no one did. You didn't help them. You didn't even try." Selena stared at the table. "I lost everything. My freedom," Darius said. "My name. My grandmother. She died in a hospital bed while I was rotting in a cell. I couldn't even go to her funeral." Tears streamed down Selena's cheeks. "I'm sorry." Darius reached into his pocket, pulled out a small voice recorder, and pressed a button. "Say it." "What?" "All of it. The truth." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I stole $2 million. I owed my boss. I knew they were coming for me, and I panicked. I staged the scene, used your shirt, cut my hair, tossed my belongings in the river. I planted evidence because I knew they'd suspect you. I thought I'd be gone before it stuck." The recorder clicked off. "Do your husband and kids know who you are?" Darius asked. She shook her head. "You took everything from me," he said, "and just kept going like it was nothing." "I never forgot you," she whispered. I did what I had to do." Darius rose slowly from his seat. "That's what you always do." Selena looked up. "What now?" "That's not up to me anymore." He turned and walked away. That night, Selena told her husband she needed to visit family in Merida, said it was urgent. She kissed her children, packed a small suitcase, and left before dawn. 3 days later, her husband reported her missing. Her phone was found on the kitchen counter, her passport in the drawer. Local police searched. Nothing. Then, a maid at a roadside motel found a pair of red heels and a floral sundress in a dumpster. A broken necklace. A strand of dark hair. No blood. CCTV showed a woman matching Selena's build entering the motel the night she disappeared. No footage ever showed her leaving. Witnesses reported seeing an older, heavy-set man walking alone near the bus terminal that same night. Cameras caught him tossing a small object into a trash bin. It was never recovered. Darius Holloway never returned to Georgia. But one thing was certain, Selena Brooks had vanished again. And this time, it wasn't her plan. The first body was found 3 days later. A fisherman spotted it tangled in jagged brush below a steep cliff outside Cancun. Her body was twisted, broken. Bruises covered her arms and legs. But it wasn't the injuries that froze investigators. It was her face. It was Selena Brooks, known in Mexico as Maria Lopez. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the back of the head. The angle of the blow and the position of her body suggested she was struck first, then thrown from the cliff. Wrapped in a brown evidence bag near the scene was something chilling, a torn wedding photo. Selena and Darius, young and smiling, on the courthouse steps in Georgia. Only her half remained intact. The story spread fast. American woman found dead in Mexico. It went viral when her husband told authorities she'd been acting strange all week, glancing over her shoulder, jumping at shadows, refusing to go to the beach. He said she'd mentioned someone from her past finding her. He never imagined she meant a man she'd once buried in a lie. Authorities uncovered her fingerprints in an old U.S. case file. Selena Brooks, presumed dead after a bloody domestic scene in Atlanta. Married to Darius Holloway, the man who served 22 years for her murder, except he hadn't killed her. Mexican police pieced together the history. Stolen drug money, the fake death, the planted evidence, the wrongful conviction. They quickly zeroed in on one name, Darius Holloway. But Darius was gone. Hotel records showed he'd checked out of small in hours before her estimated time of death. Paid in cash. Surveillance captured him walking out with a black duffel bag. Calm expression. That was the last confirmed sighting. His face appeared on news broadcasts around the world. Some called him a murderer. Others said he did what the system had failed to do. Selena's new husband and children grieved in silence. They held a memorial on the beach, lighting candles and sending paper lanterns into the dark. But whispers persisted. She was a good mother, but she'd been running from something. The cliff where her body was found held one more clue. Size 12 boot prints and a cigarette, but with degraded saliva. The tread was from a brand sold only in the U.S. Then investigators found the voice recording, buried in the cloud after being deleted from her phone. Her voice was shaky, crying, "I didn't know he was out. He said he wasn't going to hurt me. He just wanted the truth." The recording cut off mid-sentence. It wasn't enough to close the case. Some believed Darius crossed into Belize or Honduras. A bartender swore he'd seen a man matching his description, drinking alone, paying in crisp U.S. bills. Another claimed to have hired a quiet mechanic who never showed ID. No lead ever stuck. Back in Georgia, the state quietly dropped his parole review from the public docket. There was no active U.S. warrant. "He's somewhere peaceful," one of his old cellmates said. He waited 22 years, took his time, and when it was done, he vanished like smoke. Others saw him as a killer who carried out the perfect revenge. Still, that torn wedding photo spoke louder than any headline. Selena faked her death. In the end, Darius made it real. One investigator put it simply, "This isn't about right or wrong. It's about what happens when the system fails. When grief turns to obsession and love twisted by betrayal becomes the sharpest weapon of all." Selena Brooks's murder remains unsolved. 22 years for a murder he didn't commit. But what do you do when the person you went to prison for is alive, free, and unbothered? That's not just a question for courtrooms. It's one for the soul. Darius Holloway was never declared a hero. There were no medals, no apologies, no parades. He simply walked back into the world, older, harder, forgotten. What came next changed everything. We may never know where he is. Maybe he's out there still, watching waves crash far from courts and cages. Or maybe he's gone for good, knowing the chapter was finally closed. Justice doesn't always come with a gavel. Sometimes it comes with a long stare across a cafe table, a taped confession whispered through tears or silence. This case was never about law. It was about love, warped, betrayed, and left to rot behind steel bars. And when that kind of love resurfaces, it doesn't ask for forgiveness. It demands a reckoning. Was it revenge? Was it justice? That depends on who's telling the story. If this story moved you, there's so much more to uncover. Subscribe now to never miss the drama, the emotion, and the untold truths. Join the journey. Hit that button and be part of the next stories. This is Ruthless Realities. Until next time.